Hello, everybody, and welcome to SandCastles Grief in Brief. My name is Leah, and I'm a clinical coordinator with SandCastles Grief Support Program, and I am here with one of my lovely interns named Charlie. Say hi, Charlie.
Hi, guys.
In today's topic, we're talking about anticipatory grief in adolescence. I'm going to just kind of ask Charlie some questions about his experience since he has some personal experience with this, and this can be used whether it's in your professional or personal life when working with children and youth, because we know that anticipatory grief can affect all ages, and it's important to be mindful of this topic. So Charlie, my first question for you is, how would you define anticipatory grief?
I typically would just define it as the grief before somebody has passed, usually individuals who have like chronic illnesses or just someone that you know is most likely going to die, like that has that doesn't always have a date attached to it, but sometimes it'll be like a 6 month period or probably a year left, just any kind of grief that's happening before the person has died.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think that anticipatory grief can affect adolescents?
Um, it can be a little more difficult for younger people to process that idea that somebody is going to die. They might not have experienced a death yet, or they might not understand the true scope of a chronic illness or what it means for someone. So it can be harder for children to realize what they're feeling, or it might just be very overwhelming. Um, and overall, it can be harder for adolescent to process.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you have personal experience with this, so can you tell me a little bit about your dad and his story?
Yes. So my dad was diagnosed with colorectal cancer when I was in like second grade. So I was pretty young, even before adolescence, you could say. And at that point, it wasn't necessarily chronic for him. Um, but after a few years of surgeries and chemos and radiations and all of that, it spread, so it became stage 4, which is the you know
Kind of the worst of the worst.
yeah. So at that point, I was probably in like fifth or sixth grade, more middle school, and that's when my parents sat me down and told me that the doctors estimated that he would probably live about 6 more months. And he ended up living a lot longer than that. He didn't pass until I was 17, the summer before my senior year of high school. So while I'm extremely grateful for all of that extra time, it did make it a little more difficult and very confusing for me when I was younger, when I was given that 6 month cutoff, and then it just kept going. But
Mm-hmm.
he was a great guy. He loved nature and reading and learning, um, and I miss him a lot. But glad to be doing work here to kind of help others who might be going through similar things.
Yeah, it definitely kind of puts a purpose. We've kind of, a lot of people, interns that come in through Sandcastles have experienced the death of someone loved. And so, although this really, kind of crappy and horrible thing has happened, we can kind of put some meaning to it and give back to the youth. And now that you have this experience, it's kind of it's vital to the fact that you can relate to the kids in group as well and know that they can become successful adults in the
Mm-hmm.
future. It can be hard for people who don't realize grief can begin before a death. And what did that look like for you while your dad was sick?
Like I kind of mentioned already, it was just really confusing.
Mm-hmm.
It felt at times like I wanted to distance myself from him because I knew that pain was coming. I didn't understand that it like was grief and that I was grieving him while he was still here, because that didn't make sense
Mm-hmm.
until I learned more as I got older. But it was, for a long period, I was kind of scared to be close to him, and I was scared to have too much of a relationship with him because I was worried that it would just make it worse when he did die, especially with that such a short frame that I was given. But thankfully, as I got a little bit older into my later teen years, we did have a very good relationship before he passed. But there was a long period of time where it was just really scary and confusing, and I didn't understand why he was still alive if he was going to just die so soon, I think.
Almost as a kid, you probably didn't know it, but trying to protect your heart, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And did you think you understood what you were feeling was grief at the time?
At the time, I didn't, definitely did not. I saw how upset like my mom was and how upset my brothers were and all my other family, but I was still young enough that I was almost blissfully aware to some of it.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't lost anybody huge yet, um, so I didn't fully understand even what grief truly meant, I don't think. So I definitely didn't recognize the feelings as grief. Yeah.
Yeah, and you were pretty young at the time. And um, did having, that anticipatory grief change how you experienced his death, do you think?
I think definitely when he passed, it it was easier in some ways and harder in some ways. I knew it was coming for a long time, and even the last few months before he did pass, it was a pretty heavy decline in his usual from his usual self. So we could all really tell it was coming, and I think all of the experience I'd had for those years and years of waiting
Mm-hmm.
did really help me just accept the fact when he did die. I don't think I really ever had much of a denial phase because I had known for so long that it was coming, and I had prepared myself in a lot of ways, and
Right.
I was able to have a lot of conversations with him before his death, and we wrote his obituary together
Mm-hmm.
a week or so before he died. So there's a lot of things that I am grateful that I was able to do that were also hard, and I've had to work a lot through them. But overall, I would say that it changed in a good way. I would say
Mm-hmm.
more than anything, even though it was extremely hard, and I'm very grateful that I had the tools to an extent to get through it.
Yeah. And, we know that support following a death is important, but we also know that support, for during that anticipatory grief time is also important. So, wondering kind of what kind of support did you receive during that time, if any?
Um, while I was in and out of therapy a lot. My mom and my dad, they thought it was important that I talk to someone, but during those younger years, I was very resistant to it. I wouldn't share. I would never talk about my dad. Would never talk about that kind of stuff. Um, so support was definitely offered to me. I just don't think I was ready at the time to take it. And I mean, with friends, it's such a complex thing because not many middle schoolers, early high schoolers have lost anybody significant. Not many families talk about grief or talk about
Mm-hmm.
death in accepting ways. So it was kind of taboo. My friends knew that he was sick and they knew that he was going to die because I was pretty open about it. But um, I think it made a lot of them uncomfortable, and it made a lot of, their parents even, they probably didn't want to have those conversations with their kids. So I do feel like I was often shut down in more social settings when it came to discussing my dad, but thankfully my family was pretty supportive and tried their best to make sure that I was supported through his loss and sickness.
Absolutely. And kind of reflecting back to your friends or maybe like teachers or anybody else in your life, what do you wish people had understood about what you were going through?
I wish that it was just more able to be openly talked about. Death is definitely a tricky topic. It's nothing that people love to talk about. People don't love thinking about death, but it is one of the most significant parts of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have just loved if it had just been more accepting and just more that I was able to talk about it, because it made it worse almost.
Yeah.
It made me kind of retreat more. Like it was just kind of
Very taboo to talk about.
yeah, and how I was distant with him and didn't want to connect with him, that was kind of reinforced by how it was treated when I tried talking about his illness or talking about how he was sick with people. So yeah, just more support. And even after his death, not many of my friends were very supportive or there for me. And it's the same thing, and I think partially they knew it was coming too. So when it did happen, they just thought I would be fine. But I mean, I still grieve him to this day, and it's been 3 to 4 years, so it's not something that goes away. But if you have that support and those friendships from the beginning, it can be really helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I'm here to tell you my mom has been gone for 15 plus years, and I still think about her a lot. And you're right, grief does not just go away. And I think that's an important thing that with SandCastles we're kind of working on, is teaching our youth how to be grief allies and supporting each other, because grief affects everybody. It's going to affect you, if not in adolescence or childhood, but in adulthood as well. So giving people, we don't always know what to say, but not talking about it is also not helpful. And I also just, some reflection points and takeaways is, looking back now, how have these experiences with anticipatory grief shaped you today?
I think it's made me a kinder person. It's made me a more empathetic person. I think I'm not glad that any of it happened, but I think a lot of the things that I find a lot of joy in currently in my life have kind of led from my dad and him being sick, and just the way that it shaped me. So I'm grateful for the opportunities I have now and the way that my life is now. And I know it wouldn't be that way if it hadn't happened. Um, and I think the anticipatory part of it did help me understand what was going on more. It gave me more time to learn, and I definitely learned a lot. And medically wise, my dad was able to join a lot of drug trials, and he was able to further those kinds of things. And he was the longest living patient of his kind of cancer his doctor had ever had. So there was a lot of just little things in that, and he chose to look at those with joy and with patience and acceptance. So I just kind of try to mirror how he looked at things, because I know that's what he would have wanted.
Right. And what is important for, our community or parents to really understand about anticipatory grief, in youth?
It's really just so important to talk to your kids. Obviously, you don't have to tell them every single nitty gritty, horrible, sad detail, but my parents did a really good job of telling me what chemo was, and saying and telling me when the medical appointments were and where they were going and what they were doing. There was never any huge secrets. All the important results were shared with me, at an age appropriate level, of course. But
Yeah.
especially in my teen years, I would take my dad to appointments. Like, I was involved in the process, and I think just going to some visits and like seeing what was going on helped me understand more. So it can be, I'm sure those conversations are hard. I'm not a parent yet, but you don't want to talk to your kids about that kind of stuff. You want to protect them from it, but in the long run, it's much more of a protection for them to be aware and for them to have the tools to deal with those emotions, because eventually, no matter what you do, they're going to feel them at some point. So I'd say it's important to be involved and let them be a part of the process and, age appropriate, however they feel that they'd like to be involved. I think that's really important.
And kind of going back to that honesty part, I mean, like you said, they don't always need or really understand all the medical nitty gritty details, but age appropriate language and honesty is very important versus them making up something worse in their head. Yeah. So I'm glad to hear that you had, that experience with your parents, that they were able to explain things to you in an age appropriate way. And I'm just, so proud of how far you've come with your internship this year as a social work student, and appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences with us.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's it for now, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Grief and Brief through SandCastles.